Hi there! Thank you so much for tuning in to the Purple Pixie. My name is Crystal, and I want to welcome you to the Fairy Garden, aka my craft room. You'll see all kinds of things here, like DIYs and tutorials, home decor, trash to treasure, dupes, flips, makeovers, organizing, stash busting, tips, tricks, hacks, and even a recipe now and then. I also make my own craft supplies. Why? Because I'm on a budget that is so tight, even the piggy squeals when I reach for them. But let's face it, when was the last time you saw a pixie fairy with a job? Well, other than maybe a fairy godmother. But heck, with this economy, even that doesn't pay what it used to. But I always manage. And sometimes I make a little magic, but I also make some mishaps too. Either way, I always invite you to tell me what you think. So now, let me wave my wand and let's attempt some of that magic, shall we? Ah, MacKenzie Childs. Unless you've been living under a rock, if you're into crafting home decor, you'll recognize the name. The company is one of the top designers in the business. Unfortunately for people like me, their beautiful high-end products go for a high-end price. Standing bunny here is $98. And this beautiful flower market candle centerpiece, a whopping $278. Their furniture pieces, like this foxtrot bar cabinet, $8,995. Even the simplistic spiral column outdoor pedestals, $4,995. Now, I don't know about you, but I sure can't afford those prices. Heck, I'm so broke, the generic Mountain Dew I drink is called Hillside Rainwater. But I do have a few tricks up my sleeve, so let's get into project number 1, Courtly Check Rabbits. Now, I'll admit, I wasn't a very big MacKenzie Childs fan. In fact, I'd never even been to the website until after I completed all of these projects. Needless to say, I surprised even myself with how close my DIYs came to their products. So if I was shocked, I'm sure you're going to be too. Now, my mom's had this folding bunny screen for quite a few years. I didn't have the heart to throw it away, even though it was way out of date. So I decided to make it reversible. One day I'll get around to painting this side of it, but for now, I'm going to do my courtly check on the back. And I started with quite a few coats of white acrylic paint. In fact, all of these projects are done with acrylic paint. And you know why? Because I didn't own any chalk paint at the time. I've since rectified that situation. In fact, I found a great deal on Facebook Marketplace of somebody that was getting rid of all their craft supplies. So can you believe it? For $10, I got 10 8-ounce jars of Waverly chalk paint. And since it seems like the only luck I ever have is bad luck, I'm gonna chalk that one up to a good blessing. Now, here you see me taking some painter's tape and marking off where I'm going to paint my black checks. I'm using a small piece in between each strip so I can get my spacing just right. And by the way, did I mention that those jars of Waverly chalk paint were brand new? They'd never even been opened. Talk about a major score for me, right? Once I have all of my areas taped off, I'm going to come back again in the opposite direction and do the same thing, using the spacer again to get my strips just right. Okay, I think you get the idea. Let's move on to the painting part. You see that big jar of acrylic black paint right there? Yeah, I couldn't get that one open. So I grabbed my second big jar of black acrylic paint, crossed my fingers, and with a little elbow grease, I was able to get it open. Good thing too, because otherwise this whole project would have been a bust. Now that I have my paint open, all I have to do is paint all of the white areas black. And I feel as though I should mention that before I started painting, I did use my scraper tool from my silhouette, and I pressed down real hard on all the painter's tape, just to make sure I get a good seal and I don't have any bleeding. And now that that coat is done, it's time to peel up the tape. It's so satisfying to peel up a stencil and see nice, crisp lines. And just for that reason, I'm not going to cut this part out. I hope you enjoy this as much as I did. It's looking beautiful already, but the checks need to be touching on the corners. So I'm going to go back in with my painter's tape and go over the black checks that we just painted. But little did I know, I was already messing up. Can you spot my mistake? And once the first layer is laid down, go back over it again in the opposite direction. And again, I'm just going to paint all the white areas black. I'm all excited and ready to peel off that painter's tape, but still crossing my fingers that everything goes well. But then again, what would a purple pixie video be without a few fails? And this was number one. For some reason, the checks didn't match up. So I decided to start peeling from the bottom, as if that was gonna make any difference. If I had laid my tape down right, this would have worked out great. As you can tell, I was slightly perturbed at this point, but I figured the tape's gotta come off anyway, so I just kept peeling. For some reason, I thought that maybe when I went to peel the tape in the opposite direction, it would miraculously surprise me and be perfect. But it wasn't. However, it was at this point that I realized my painter's tape was actually peeling up the paint. So rather than risk failing for a third time, I did what I should have done from the very beginning, which is go in and draw the checks myself. Once I got all the checks drawn out, I went back in and hand painted each black check. Now I'm not gonna lie, that took me quite a while. I don't exactly have the most steady hand when it comes to painting straight lines. So I'm gonna spare you the agony of having to watch me do that. Just know that there was a lot of frustration and a lot of layers of touch-ups, but this is how it all turned out. Well worth it, I'd say. Now I've got to go around the edges with a gold paint marker. I'd had these paint markers for several years, but I'd never used them before. It wasn't until recently when I organized my craft room that I found them. So I wasn't quite sure how it was going to turn out. And, well, as you see here, I'm getting out the gold acrylic paint because, well, I didn't like how it turned out. The paint and the markers was still good. I just wanted a thicker and more noticeable gold trim. So once again, I resorted to hand painting it. My original plan for this project was to decoupage some flowers onto the bunnies. Because florals is something I don't have a whole lot of in my stash, and I wanted the screen to be able to fold shut for storage. However, I had just deconstructed a wreath that's been sitting in my stash for a few years, so I had some flowers to spare. I cleaned them up as best I could, and then I clipped them down as far as I could so they would lay as flat as possible on the bunny screen. Then, once I had the floral placement figured out, it was just a matter of gluing them down. By the way, if you ever have a problem with your glue sticks falling out of your glue gun, just put a dab of hot glue on one end, stick it into your glue gun, and press it up against the other glue stick. I personally don't have a problem with my glue sticks falling out, but I just wanted to show you that little tip in case someone out there might find it helpful. Once I had all the flowers and leaves glued down, this courtly check rabbit screen is all done. Stay tuned to the end of the final reveal to see it in the vignette. But for now, we're on to project number 2, which is a MacKenzie Childs inspired riser tray. This project is so easy, it could be working on a street corner in a bad neighborhood. I simply took a 5x7 photo frame from the Dollar Tree and traced around the glass onto a piece of foam core board. Now, you could use whatever size photo frame you want. I just so happen to have this one on hand. And then, because I can't cut a straight line without help, I'm using my metal ruler, my heavy-duty box cutter, on top of my self-healing mat to cut out the square. I mean, rectangle. Jeez, I may not be a math whiz, but I at least didn't fail geometry. And now I'm putting the foam core board back into the frame and tracing the outline. I'm going to be painting a black stripe around the entire rectangle, and since I haven't had much luck with the painter's tape, I'm just going to go in and draw the lines with my ruler. Now, if you're like me, and you don't have a very steady hand when it comes to painting, you could use some kind of straight edge, like a ruler, or perhaps some tape, or even a piece of copy paper, just to make sure that your lines are straight and crisp. Speaking of copy paper, I should have put some underneath my project. That way I wouldn't have gotten paint all over my cutting mat. Say, I was actually quite amazed at myself. I was able to get those lines pretty darn straight. One thing I learned in art class back in high school, other than how to make a mess, was that if you load your brush pretty well, it'll be easier to paint a straight line. Plus, you can't tell here because I have it sped up so fast, but I really just took my time and went as slow as I could. Once the paint was all dry, I simply put it back in the frame along with another piece of foam core board. And then to add some feet to my riser tray, I simply took these 4 crystal drawer pulls and glued one in each corner of the frame. And now we'll be working on our beaded tassel garland. This is another super simple project that you could probably make with stuff that you already have in your craft stash. I've had these beads for quite a while. In fact, I got them off of jewelry that I bought at the dollar store. And I'm just going to string them together with some fishing line. I use the corner of my jewelry board to hold the fishing line in place while I string my beads. But first, I'm going to measure out my fishing line to make sure that I have enough to not just string my garland together, but also to tie the tassel on when I'm done. This fishing line is so old, I stole it out of my husband's tackle box, thinking it would deter him from going fishing so often. And as of April Fool's Day, I've been divorced 21 years. His faithfulness might not have lasted long, but thank God his fishing line did. Once I have my garland strung, I'm going to take the fishing line and tie it in a knot around the last bead. Once I know my knot is good and tight, I'm going to take the loose end of the fishing string and feed it back through some of the beads on the strand. And then I tie another little knot and trim off the loose end. I flip the garland over to the other side and tie a knot around the last bead on that end as well. But this time, before I tie that knot, I want to make sure that all my beads are pushed together so I don't end up with some kind of loosey-goosey garland. And now we're getting to the really fun part. We're going to make a tassel. I'm going to be using this metallic gold crochet thread that I have, mainly because I hate using it for anything else. It curls up on itself tighter than a snake in a preacher's hand, so it's not very ideal for crochet, but it does make a beautiful tassel. If making a tassel intimidates you, like it did me at one time, I'll make it easy for you. Just take a small piece of whatever you're making your tassel out of, in this case, crochet thread, and tape it to the top of your tassel form. Then take your thread and wrap it around that form about 1,427 times. Okay. I wasn't joking when I said I wasn't a math whiz. But I am joking about the 1,427 times. Just keep wrapping and wrapping until you think your tassel's going to be full enough, and then wrap some more. Now before you remove those wraps from the form, or cut it at the bottom, untape your little strand at the top and tie it as tight as you can around the wraps. Once you've got that knot as tight as you can get it, slip your scissors into the bottom of the wraps and cut all the way through. Now, the wraps need to be wrapped. You could simply take your thread, wind it around a few times, tie it in a knot and be done. But I'm going to show you how to hide your knot. With the loose end of your thread pointing to the top, bring your thread down about 1/3 of the way of the tassel. Hold that in place with your thumb. Then take your thread back up to the top and start winding it around the tassel. You'll want to wind it kind of tight, but you also want to avoid overlapping any of the wraps. I'm going to be adding this pendant to my tassel, so I'm going to put it on right now. To make sure this wonky thread doesn't come unraveled, I'm just going to hold it in place with a small piece of Scotch tape. I cut a long piece of thread, and then I just string my pendant onto it. You know, all these years I've wondered what I was going to do with this big gaudy pendant. But it's a good thing I don't throw anything away, because sooner or later I'll find a use for everything. Now I just remove my little piece of Scotch tape and continue wrapping my thread around my tassel. I wanted to wrap it around the pendant as well, but that didn't work out as planned. No big deal though, it still turns out really pretty. Okay, now that you have it wrapped as many times as you want, you're going to take the loose end and feed it through that loop that you were holding with your thumb. And then take the loose end at the top of the tassel and pull tight. This should pull your knot up under the wraps that you just made. And if not, it'll come close to it. Then you simply trim off that one loose end at the top, but be careful not to trim off the other two loose ends, because that's what we're going to tie to our garland. And now you can see what I mean by this stuff curls up on itself. It took me forever to fluff out this tassel. I even had to break out a paintbrush and use that like a comb. And it still curls up on itself. But once I get it as straight as I possibly can, I gather it in my hand and with my good scissors, trim off the ends to make them flush. Now remember that extra fishing line we left at the end of our garland? I'm going to feed that through the top of the tassel, and then much like we finished off the other end of the garland, I'm going to feed that fishing line back through some of the beads on the garland. This just happened to be one of the days when I needed to clean my glasses because I couldn't see the hole in the bead to get the fishing line back through it. But once I got it through the first one, the other ones weren't much of a problem. And again, I just tied a knot around one of the beads and then snipped off the excess. And as it turned out, I didn't need those loose ends on my tassel anyway, so I just trimmed those off as well. But now I need something else to go on my riser tray with my garland, so we're making a painted egg. Years ago, I took some plaster of Paris and put it in a silicone egg mold that I had. And then I just painted it with some gold glitter acrylic paint. Just because Veruca Salt from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory couldn't have one, that didn't mean I wasn't going to get my golden egg. But then, just like most things of want, once I had it, I didn't know what to do with it. So I decided to just go ahead and paint it black. Once it was dry, I went in with some more white acrylic paint, as well as more gold, and just painted the raised chevron pattern on the egg. But it was still missing something. Maybe something like a little bow. And since I can't tie little bows, I just decided to take some of my black and white polka dotted ribbon and make a little messy bow. I cut the ribbon into small strips and then cinched it together in the middle with a white pipe cleaner. Although, since I am making high-end decor, maybe I should call it a chenille stem. Or I could even take it one step further than that and call my messy bow an archon de soldera. Nah, even though it is pretty, it's still just an egg with a bow. But now that I'm feeling a little fancy, let's take a fur baby break and visit Mon Chat Sydney. If you're already a part of the Pixie Party, then chances are you've met my cat, Sydney. But did you know that Sydney can do tricks? Like pouting under my craft desk when I won't give her any attention. And shedding that beautiful fur no matter what time of year it is. Here's one of her most favorite tricks, playing dead. She can do this one all day long. She loves to give love bites, and boy do I have the scars to prove it. She can go cross-eyed when she wants to, and even when she doesn't want to. And there she is playing dead again. I told you that was her favorite. Even though she's a fatty, she can still squeeze between me and my chair. She's really good at playing peekaboo too. But she usually only comes out if she hears me shake her treats. But in my opinion, her best trick of all is sitting pretty. Do you have a fur baby? If so, send me an email with a picture and some details. I'd love to include them in my fur baby breaks, especially since mine are getting tired of me taking their picture. And now let's move on to our last project of the day, the floating teacup. Just like 99.9% of all my other projects, this one didn't cost me a dime. Why? Because I used items that I already had on hand. Chances are you probably have these things on hand too. I've had these pretty teacups for quite a while now, but I wasn't putting them to use, and I really liked the shape of them. So I decided to go ahead and sacrifice this one for the project. As you saw, I gave it a few good coats of the white acrylic paint. Had I had some chalk paint, I probably could have cut down on the number of coats. But since I scored such a great deal on Marketplace with those Waverly chalk paints, that acrylic paint problem is going to be an issue of the past. Just like my arrest record. By the way, just a heads up, if they tell you to take the probation program and it won't go on your record, they lie. Anyway, back to the project. Now, if I hadn't filmed this and watched it all over again, I never would have believed that I actually free-handed those squares onto this teacup. But I did. And you know what else I did? Went in with my black acrylic paint marker and traced over those lines with the intention of just using the paint marker to color in the squares. But apparently, acrylic paint markers don't like to write on acrylic paint. So, instead of using my paint marker, I just went in and hand painted each check. And of course I messed up quite a few times and had to go back over it and do some touch-ups here and there, but it was all worth it in the end. This octagon bowl comes from a dish set that I've had for, again, quite a few years. It originally belonged to my late fiance, God rest his soul. It was one of the few dishes he had in his cupboard when I met him. His ex took the rest. I can see why she left these behind. But y'all know me, I'm not gonna throw anything away, especially if I can use it somehow. So these have been sitting in my cupboard for about 8 years. And again, I decided to sacrifice one for the good of the project. So this time, I just took my white acrylic paint marker and just went to town on this baby. It was really fun just freehanding all these checks, but it wasn't as easy as it looks. And of course, it needed a second coat. Rather than go back in with a paint marker and risk it wiping itself off, I just freehanded it with some more white acrylic paint. Of course, this meant that it needed some touch-ups, much like my hair, and my wardrobe, well, pretty much my whole life. But that's neither here nor there, so let's just focus on the project, shall we? Once all the white checks were painted, it was time to go back in with my gold paint and paint around the rim on the bottom of the bowl. And since I had been doing such a good job at painting, I guess I got a little overconfident on this one. Because what happened next? Well, you may have guessed. While turning the bowl to paint, of course I stuck my hand right in the wet paint. And of course, that got all over the bottom of my bowl. And then for some stupid reason, I go and clean it off. As if I'm not going to cover this thing with flowers anyway. But I got it all clean, went back to painting my edges, and was a little more cautious on the second coat. I also went around the bottom of my bowl with the gold acrylic paint, as well as around the top and bottom rims and the handle of the teacup. When I say I had to do some touch-up work on these babies, I meant it. So here, I took some acetone and a little bitty sponge brush that's meant to be used to remove nail polish. Unlike a Q-tip, this little sponge brush has a flattened edge, so it made it really easy to go along and clean up my lines. But there are also bigger areas that needed to be touched up. So for that, I just took a paintbrush tip and a paper towel, dipped that in the acetone, and continued to touch up my edges. Now, I wasn't able to film myself bending and flattening this spoon. But it really wasn't that hard. And trust me, if little old me can do it, so can you. I just took it outside, and on the concrete, I used a hammer to flatten out the spoon. Once that was done, I used some pliers and, well, my big clamps that you see right there on the right, to clamp it onto my table and then use the pliers to bend it. Now don't get me wrong, if I'd have used a good spoon, I probably wouldn't have been able to bend it myself. But this is one of those cheap ones you can get from the Dollar Tree, so it really wasn't that hard. And once I got it flattened and bent to the shape that I wanted, I just used some E6000 and some hot glue to hold it in place. Once that had dried, I'm going to glue the handle of the spoon inside the teacup. To do this, I had to prop the teacup up and tape the handle down while it dried. I set it aside to dry for a few hours because the last thing I wanted was my hand-painted teacup to fall off the spoon handle and break. So when I was finally confident enough to mess with it again, I took some of these rocks that I got at the Dollar Tree and I hot glued them inside the bowl to counteract the weight of the teacup. It was just a big old mess of hot glue and rocks until the inside of the bowl was heavy enough. All that was left to do at this point was to add my flowers and my greenery. So I took some of those flowers that I got off of that wreath that I had disassembled, cleaned them up real good, and I just started gluing them all over inside the teacup, down the stem of the spoon, and also on top of the bowl. And now here's the part we've all been waiting for, the final reveal. So what do you think? I think I did pretty good considering I'd never even seen their website before. And let's kind of break down the cost a little bit here. Mrs. Rabbit, $88. And that's just one rabbit. This trinket tray, $188. A set of 5 eggs for $48. And one teacup, a whopping $138. Like I said, I'm no math genius, but that adds up to $462. My projects, if I'm being generous with the price, only come up to $5. So what do you think? Were they magic or mishap? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you like this video and want to see more like it, why not become part of the Pixie Party? Go ahead and subscribe and ring my bell so that you'll be notified every time I upload a video. Give me a big thumbs up, but if you didn't like it, you can also give me a big thumbs down. If you're already a part of the Pixie Party, I want to say welcome back and thank you so much for all of your support. You truly mean the world to me, and I wouldn't be here without you. And with that being said, I'll leave you with this. Your greatness is not what you have, but what you give. Well, folks, I gotta go. The mailman just drove by, and I've been waiting on my stimulus check. Thanks again for watching. Have a blessed day, and always remember that all of me loves all of you.